When I arrived here in 2017, I landed in Ontario and sat down at my desk and went, I actually have no idea how you get your first project or your first client. I came across a call for a public art piece to commemorate the history of Alderville First Nation in the city of Kingston. In addition to designing and being part of realizing that space for Alderville, I've also had the opportunity to actually take on the stewardship of that space for the last 3 years. I've grown a very deep attachment to that garden by actually physically maintaining it and being able to welcome Alderville back to that space every year as we open it with ceremony in the spring and then close it every year in the fall through ceremony. The Heritage Committee of Kingston also invited me to come and speak to the space, and they made an out of normal accommodation to classify it as a heritage space in the city of Kingston and provide the city of Kingston an award. I'm a member of the Métis Nation, British Columbia. I like to think of myself a lot as an intermediary. So often I say, especially to clients, that, I'm the pen and I'm trying to have them be the hand that is trying to honestly and accurately reflect their cultural values. Little moves can make such a big impact in a community. Siem Lalem in Victoria, BC, in that project, we designed the paving around a couch and weaving patterns. That simple move of taking a cultural tradition like weaving and just simply representing that in a very, very simple paving pattern for them to see themselves visually represented in the landscape and in spaces was so important. In addition to that, we also included things like a medicine wheel at Siem Lalem around the children's play area to create an element of directionality, reflecting the 4 cardinal directions on the site. We were talking a lot about youth and children and how they were sitting at the heart of everything we were thinking about. And so we chose to put the children's playground in the middle of this medicine wheel. I actually had a chance to return and visit, and I actually cried while I was on site. It's been amazingly maintained, and the community has really made it a place and made it a home for themselves. And so to see the community gardens full of vegetables and plants, to see the trees have grown in, and all the children's play equipment, all over the site, and that it's obviously loved and very well taken care of. More recent project for Salish Sea Housing Society, which is also being supported by the Victoria Native Friendship Centre. We layered on a lot of different ways of approaching integrating feedback from the clients and from the community into those projects. We didn't want to do it just visually. We also want to look at the landscape and how we could represent values and narrative through the actual plant material and the way we design the landscape. So one thing I heard from working with an elder during the process of the project was that she was really saddened by the fact that if we took a youth out and left them in the forest on Vancouver Island, that they would probably starve to death, because a lot of our youth can't identify what they can eat. So as part of the project, we elected to choose only native plants, but not just native plants that had some kind of edible or medicinal component to them. I actually developed a botanical poster that lives in the community house for Siem Lalem that outlines every single plant that we used on site and which part of it was edible and where we could find the Coast Salish names so that they could both learn the dialogue and their language, but also learn something about this small piece of environment that we had created for them. So that kind of layering of history and culture is something that we've done on both projects. I work with a group called Nikbi Tawadina Gigwag, which is an Indigenous youth training and education program that's through the University of Toronto Exchanges program. Part of my involvement with the program is to mentor them in what we do, but also encourage them to potentially consider entering the industry. I talk to them about our role with regards to climate and climate change, how we can influence that through our design choices, through the types of parks or gardens we design, through the way that we choose plants, through the way that we honor and respect water in the developments that we work on. Reconciliation is a journey. Our first goal is always ensuring that we're educating ourselves so that we can be more sensitive and empathetic when we're working with communities, and that we can start to engage in a dialogue where we're not relying on the community to do kind of a base level education of us. So we're starting from a good place where we can start a dialogue and start to make change. Then also being very, very cognizant of the work that we're doing and who it's for. How are we trying to integrate cultures that maybe aren't our own into projects? It's really important to be critical and question everything that we're doing, but also not being afraid, taking chances, because there is no guidebook, because this is a really new area of landscape architecture, where we're trying to increase the way that we work with and engage with Indigenous communities and represent them in public spaces. And if mistakes happen, to be honest and truthful about them and engage in dialogue. Our role has an incredible impact on where we live, be it in a rural community, in farmland, or in the heart of a city. All of it is touched by landscape architecture.